You've entered void of rules, where chaos reigns and darkness consumes all. In this twisted realm where all laws have crumbled, only one rule remains, and those who break it are cast into eternal digital oblivion. The rule is simple: subscribe. We're almost at 6,000 corrupted souls, but the void hungers for more. Our goal is 10,000 subscribers before this year bleeds into darkness. Will you join our legion or face the consequences of defying the void? Now let's dive into today's story. The call came on a Wednesday evening while I was finishing evening prayers in my apartment in Rome. Father Thomas Carver, they called me, specialized exorcist, 12 years serving the Vatican's Department of Divine Protection, dealing with things the church doesn't advertise in its brochures. Possessions, hauntings, the occasional cult that got too enthusiastic with their rituals. I thought I'd seen everything worth seeing in the world of spiritual warfare. Cardinal Russo's assistant was brief on the phone. The Cardinal needs to see you immediately. It's urgent. Not unusual. Urgent was basically the department's standard operating procedure. I threw on my jacket and walked the 10 minutes to the Vatican offices, enjoying the cool September air. Russo was waiting in his office, and he looked worse than I'd ever seen him. The man usually had the composed demeanour of someone who'd stared down genuine evil and lived to file the paperwork. Tonight his hands shook slightly as he poured himself wine. "Thomas, sit down. We have a situation in Montana." I sat. "Montana? That's a bit outside my usual territory." "Ashford Hollow. Small town, population 847. Had a population of 847, I should say." He slid a folder across his desk. 6 days ago the town went silent. No phone calls out, no internet activity. Nothing. We thought maybe a power outage, infrastructure failure, but the local diocese sent Father Benedict to investigate 3 days ago. And? He never came back, no communication, nothing. The diocese called us yesterday in a panic. I opened the folder. Photographs of a picturesque mountain town, the kind of place that probably looked beautiful in autumn. A personnel file on Father Benedict, a priest in his 50s with a gentle smile in his official photo, and then a leather journal, worn and stained. "Benedict's journal," Russo said. "It was mailed to the diocese 2 days before he went to investigate. Read the last entries." I flipped to the bookmarked pages. Benedict's handwriting grew increasingly frantic over the final week of entries. September 15th. Mrs. Patterson came to confession today but wouldn't speak. Just sat there for 20 minutes, whispering to the corner of the confessional. When I asked what she was saying, she looked at me like she didn't recognize me. Then she smiled and left. September 18th. More of them acting strangely. I've caught people standing in their yards at night, just staring at the tree line. When I approach, they go inside without a word. The mayor hasn't returned my calls in 3 days. September 21st, they're gathering at night. I followed them into the woods. Dozens of people, maybe 100, all walking in complete silence toward the old oak tree near where the highway project was supposed to break ground. I tried to approach, but something about that clearing made every hair on my body stand up. I need to contact the diocese. September 23rd. The church is empty on Sunday. Empty. In 20 years here, I've never seen that. But I know where they are. I can hear them at night, singing. The words sound wrong. Everything sounds wrong. I'm going to try a blessing of the site tomorrow. September 24th. The blessing did nothing. They're all going to the church now, but it's not for prayer. They're preparing. I can feel it calling to me too. When I close my eyes, I see it. When I pray, I hear it underneath my own voice. God help me, it knows my name. They're waiting for... The entry ended there, the pen trailing off the page. "What do you think he meant?" I asked. Russo refilled his wine glass. "That's what you're going to find out. I need you on a plane tomorrow morning." Document everything. Find out what happened to Benedict and those people. You think it's a possession? Mass possession is rare, but I don't know what it is, Thomas. That's why I'm sending you." He met my eyes, and for the first time in 12 years of working together, I saw genuine fear there. But between us, this isn't the first time we've seen something like this. "What do you mean?" He stood and walked to a locked cabinet, removing an old leather folder stamped with seals I didn't recognize. "What I'm about to show you doesn't leave this room. The church has encountered similar events 3 times in recorded history. 1203 in Ireland, 1692 in Portugal, 1847 in Poland. Each time, an entire community went silent. Each time, we lost the priests we sent to investigate. What happened to the people? That's what we need you to find out. The historical records are incomplete, deliberately so. But there's a pattern, Thomas. And patterns can be understood, can be fought." He pushed the folder toward me. "Read this on the plane, and Thomas, if things go badly, if you feel yourself being influenced, you get out immediately. That's an order." I took the folder. "You think I might not come back either?" "I think whatever is in Ashford Hollow has been waiting a very long time for someone to find it, and I think it's very, very good at making people want to stay." The flight to Montana felt endless. I spent most of it reading the historical accounts Rousseau had given me. The descriptions were maddeningly vague, written in the careful language of men who'd seen something they couldn't quite bring themselves to describe fully. The island incident involved a coastal village where the entire population of 200 people vanished over the course of 2 weeks. The priest who investigated wrote detailed letters at first. Then, his writing became erratic, obsessed with something he'd found in a sea cave. His final letter contained only a drawing, a symbol of 3 spirals, interlocking in a way that hurt to look at for too long. Portugal was similar. A monastery in the mountains where monks had lived in isolation for centuries suddenly stopped communicating with the outside world. The bishop who went to investigate sent back one message. They found something in the catacombs beneath the chapel, something that was here before the monastery, before Christianity, before Rome. It speaks without words. It shows us what we've always wanted to see. I understand now why they won't leave." He was never heard from again. Poland was the most recent and the most detailed. An entire village near the German border went silent in the winter of 1847. The Vatican sent 3 priests to investigate. Only one returned, and he died 3 days later in a monastery outside Krakow. Before he died, he wrote a confession that was sealed by order of Pope Pius IX himself. Rousseau had included a copy in the folder. I read it twice, my stomach turning. We found them in the forest, all 300 souls, gathered around an ancient stone that predated the village by thousands of years. They were singing, but the words were not Latin, not German, not any language I recognized. Father Dominic tried to perform an exorcism. The townspeople didn't stop him. They simply smiled and continued singing. When he threw holy water on the stone, it steamed and hissed, but nothing else happened. That's when Father Wilhelm touched it. He said he just wanted to understand what they were experiencing. The moment his hand made contact, his eyes rolled back and he began to weep. Not from fear, but from joy. He said he could finally hear God speaking back. Father Dominic pulled him away, but the damage was done. Father Wilhelm begged to go back. He clawed at his own skin when we restrained him. He screamed that we were keeping him from paradise. We had to drag him away from that village. Father Dominic stayed behind to try to save the others. I never saw either of them again. I ran, God forgive me, I ran and left them all to whatever waited in that forest. But I can still hear it sometimes in my dreams. It calls to me. It tells me I was incomplete before, and I can be whole again if I just come back. I'm writing this confession because I don't trust myself anymore. I'm writing this so someone will know what happened when I inevitably return to Poland and disappear like the others. The thing in the forest isn't evil. That's what makes it so dangerous. It simply offers us what we've always wanted, what we've prayed for our entire lives, proof that something greater exists and that it knows we're here. The priest's name was Father Andreas Kowalski. According to a note in Rousseau's handwriting, Kowalski disappeared from the monastery 2 weeks after writing his confession. His body was never found. I closed the folder and stared out the airplane window at clouds stretching to the horizon. 3 historical incidents, 3 different countries, 3 different centuries, but the same pattern. Something ancient, something that called to people, something that made them willing to abandon everything they'd known before. And now it was happening again in Montana. I landed in Billings Thursday afternoon and rented a car for the 3-hour drive to Ashford Hollow. The landscape was beautiful in that vast, empty way Montana specializes in. Mountains in the distance, endless sky, the kind of country that makes you feel simultaneously insignificant and connected to something larger. The turnoff to Ashford Hollow was marked by a weathered wooden sign. I followed the 2-lane road through pine forests until the town appeared in a valley below. From a distance, it looked perfect. A church steeple rose from the center of town, surrounded by neat rows of houses and buildings. Smoke should have been rising from chimneys. Cars should have been moving on the streets. Nothing moved. I drove down the main street at 5 in the afternoon on a Friday. In a town this size, there should have been people everywhere. Kids getting out of school, people leaving work, someone walking a dog. Instead, I saw empty streets and parked cars and absolute silence. The silence was wrong. Not just the absence of human noise, but the absence of everything. No birds singing, no insects buzzing, no wind chimes or distant traffic or rustling leaves. The air itself felt dead, like sound couldn't properly travel through it. I parked near the town square and got out. The moment my feet hit the pavement, I felt it. A pressure against my eardrums, subtle but constant, like being underwater or at a high altitude. The sensation of depth where there should be none. I called out, "Hello, anyone here? My name is Father Thomas Carver. I'm with the Catholic Church. Is anyone here?" My voice sounded flat, muffled, like I was shouting into a pillow. No echo, no resonance. The words just died in the air. The first shop I checked was the general store. The door was unlocked, swinging open at my touch. Inside, merchandise was scattered across the floor, but not randomly. Someone had arranged the fallen items into a pattern. Cans and boxes forming circles within circles, all oriented toward the back of the store where a window faced north. The cash register stood open and empty. A coffee pot sat on a burner that had long since gone cold, the coffee inside reduced to black sludge. But next to it was a fresh cup, still steaming, as if someone had poured it seconds before I arrived. I touched the cup. Hot. Recently poured. "Hello," I called again. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just want to help." A floorboard creaked upstairs. I froze, listening. Another creak, then silence. I found the stairs behind the counter and climbed slowly, one hand on the crucifix around my neck. The second floor was living quarters, a small apartment above the shop. The main room was neat, orderly, except for the walls. Every available surface was covered in drawings. The same symbol repeated thousands of times in pencil, pen, charcoal, even what looked like dried blood. 3 spirals interlocking, folding inward toward a central point that seemed to recede the longer I looked at it. And in the center of the room, arranged in a perfect circle, were photographs. Hundreds of them. Pictures of townspeople smiling, celebrating, living their normal lives. But someone had drawn the spiral symbol on each face carefully, lovingly, right over where their eyes should be. I took pictures of everything, but my camera's display kept flickering. The images appeared distorted, the spirals seeming to rotate, even in still photographs. I needed to find Benedict. He'd been here 3 days. If he was still alive, he'd be at the church or somewhere looking for shelter. I went back downstairs and out onto the street. The sun was lower now, maybe an hour from sunset. Shadows stretched long across the pavement, and in those shadows I saw movement. Fleeting, peripheral, like people ducking around corners just before I could see them clearly. "I know you're there," I said. "I'm not going to hurt anyone. I just want to talk." No response, but the sense of being watched intensified. Multiple sets of eyes tracking my every movement. I walked towards St. Michael's Church at the centre of town. With each step, the pressure in my ears increased. My head began to ache, a dull throb behind my eyes. The air felt thicker, harder to breathe, like the atmosphere itself was changing composition. Every house I passed had the same strange feature. Windows facing east were covered. Sheets, blankets, cardboard, boards nailed over the glass. Only the eastern windows. The western windows were clear, curtains open or pulled back, like someone wanted to see the sunset but couldn't bear the sunrise. I paused at one house where the front door stood ajar. Inside I could see a family dinner table still set for a meal. 4 places, food rotting on the plates, but arranged around the table were dolls positioned in the chairs as if they were the family members all facing towards the eastern wall. My hands were shaking now. This wasn't a possession. This wasn't a haunting. This was something else entirely. Something that had turned an entire town into a stage for a ritual I didn't understand. St. Michael's Church stood at the centre of town, a white wooden building with a tall steeple. The front doors were wide open, swaying slightly in a breeze I couldn't feel anywhere else. From inside came the faintest sound. Humming. Multiple voices, harmonizing in a way that made my teeth ache. I approached slowly, every instinct screaming at me to turn around and leave, but Benedict was in there. Or answers were, or both. I had a job to do. The humming stopped the moment I reached the doorway. The church interior was dim, lit only by fading sunlight through the windows. I stopped just inside the entrance, trying to process what I was seeing. All the pews had been turned around. Instead of facing the altar, they faced backward, towards the door where I stood. Every single pew, maybe 30 rows, all facing the wrong direction. I walked down the centre aisle, my footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. The altar stood empty, except for a set of vestments folded neatly in the centre. Priestly vestments, white and green. Next to them, a rosary and a Bible. I picked up the rosary first. The beads were worn smooth from years of use, warm to the touch as if someone had just been holding them. Benedict's rosary. Had to be. I opened the Bible. It was turned to the book of Job, chapter 41. Someone had underlined a passage in what looked like dried blood. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fishhook, or tie down its tongue with a rope? Will it make an agreement with you for you to take it as your slave for life? Can you make a pet of it like a bird, or put it on a leash for the young women in your house? My hands started shaking. Leviathan. The chaos monster, the great enemy of God in ancient Hebrew cosmology. The beast from the deep that God alone could control. Why had Benedict been reading about Leviathan? A sound behind me made me spin around. The pews were no longer empty. Sitting in each one, perfectly still, perfectly silent, were the townspeople. Men, women, children, all facing me, all smiling. I hadn't heard them enter, hadn't heard a single footstep, a single breath. They were just suddenly there, filling the church, hundreds of eyes fixed on me, with expressions of absolute peace. "Father Benedict," I managed to say. "Is Father Benedict here?" A man in the front pew stood. He was wearing priestly vestments, but they hung wrong on his frame. like he'd lost significant weight recently. His face was gaunt, eyes bright with fever or madness or something else entirely. "Thomas," he said, and his voice had that same layered quality from the Polish priest's description. Multiple voices speaking in unison. "They told me someone would come. They told me you'd be curious, like I was." "Benedict, what's happened here? What did you find?" He smiled, and it was the most genuinely happy expression I'd ever seen on another human being. "I found proof, Thomas. Proof that we're not alone. Proof that something listens. Proof that faith can be answered." The congregation nodded in unison, still smiling. "These people need help," I said. "Whatever is happening here, whatever you found, it's not natural. It's not from God." "How do you know?" Benedict asked. "Because it's not in our theology. Because the church doesn't have a category for it." He walked toward me, moving with an eerie grace. "The church thinks it has all the answers about the divine. Heaven, hell, angels, demons. But we're children playing with building blocks, Thomas. What we found here is older than our concepts of good and evil. It was here before humans learned to speak, before we invented gods to explain the darkness." "Show me," I said. "Show me what you found." Benedict's smile widened. "I was hoping you'd ask." He turned and walked toward the back of the church. The congregation rose as one and followed, moving in perfect synchronization. I had no choice but to follow too. Behind the altar was a door I'd missed before, hidden in the shadows. Benedict opened it, revealing stairs, leading down. The basement, or what used to be the basement. The stairs descended much farther than they should have. 20 steps, 30, 40. The air grew colder with each step, and that pressure in my ears intensified until I thought my eardrums might burst. At the bottom was a room that shouldn't have existed. It was too large to fit under the church, stretching away into darkness in all directions. The walls were stone, but not modern foundation work. These were ancient stones, covered in carvings that predated any written language I knew. The congregation filed in and arranged themselves in concentric circles around the center of the room. In that center stood something I initially thought was a pillar or column. But as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized it was organic. A massive root, easily 10 feet in diameter, pushing up through the stone floor from some unimaginable depth below. The root's surface was covered in bark that seemed to shift and move when I wasn't looking directly at it. And carved into that bark, or maybe growing from it naturally, was the symbol. 3 spirals, interlocking, pulling an inward toward a central point. "The oak tree in the forest," Benedict said softly. "What people see above ground is just the smallest part. The roots go down for miles, Thomas, miles and miles, into geological strata that shouldn't have trees, into depths where nothing should be alive. But it is alive. It's been alive for longer than human civilization, longer than humanity itself." I wanted to run. Every survival instinct I had screamed at me to turn around and climb those stairs and never look back. But I couldn't move. The symbol on the root held my gaze, pulled at something deep in my brain. "What is it?" I whispered. "We don't have words for what it is. It exists in the spaces between matter and consciousness, between the physical and spiritual." The surveying team broke through a sealed chamber that had kept it dormant for thousands of years. When they cracked that seal, it woke up. And it was so very, very hungry. Hungry for what? For connection, for consciousness, for the energy that humans generate when they direct their thoughts towards something greater than themselves. Benedict placed his hand on the root, and his expression became ecstatic. "We spend our lives praying to God, Thomas, generating all this spiritual energy, all this devotion and faith, and directing it towards something that never responds. But this responds. Touch it and you will understand. That's how it feeds. That's how it's consuming you." "Consuming? No, Thomas, completing. We're not whole by ourselves. Every human carries this void inside. this desperate need to be part of something larger. We try to fill it with religion, with relationships, with work, with anything we can find. But nothing ever truly fills it because we're directing our energy at abstractions, at concepts and ideas. This is real. This is tangible. Touch it and feel what it's like to finally be complete. The congregation began to hum, that same backward hymn I'd heard earlier. The sound resonated in the stone room, building in layers until I felt it in my chest, in my bones. "I can't let this continue," I said, reaching for my holy water. "I'm here to stop this." "Stop what? Stop people from finding purpose? Stop them from being happy?" Benedict gestured to the congregation. "Look at them, Thomas. Really look. Do they seem possessed? Corrupted? Evil?" I looked. They didn't look possessed. They looked peaceful, content, fulfilled. Parents held their children. Elderly couples leaned on each other for support. They looked like a normal congregation, except for that universal expression of absolute certainty on every face. "Let me show you something," Benedict said. He nodded to a woman in the front circle. She stepped forward, smiling. It was Mrs. Patterson from his journal, the woman who'd whispered to Corners during confession. "Tell Father Carver what you felt before," Benedict said gently. Mrs. Patterson's smile faltered slightly. "I was empty. My husband died 2 years ago, cancer. I prayed every day for God to take away the pain, to give me a reason to keep living, but the pain never lessened. God never answered. I started to think, maybe he wasn't there at all. Maybe I wasted my whole life believing in nothing." "And now?" Benedict prompted. Her smile returned, brighter than before. "Now I know something is listening. When I touch the root, I feel my husband's presence. Not his memory, but him, actually him. Like he's part of something larger now, and he's calling me to join him. I'm not empty anymore. I have purpose. I'm going to be with him again, really be with him, not in some abstract heaven, but in actual unity with his consciousness." Other members of the congregation nodded, murmuring agreement. "You see," Benedict said, "this isn't evil, Thomas. It's just offering us what we've always wanted." I unscrewed the cap on my holy water. "I'm going to perform an exorcism, move away from the root. That won't work. This isn't a demon you can banish with rituals. But please try. I want you to see for yourself that your tools have no power here." I began the formal rite of exorcism, my voice echoing in the stone chamber. "In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, I command you, unclean spirit, depart from this place. Release these souls from your influence. Return to the void from which you came." Nothing happened. The congregation continued humming, undisturbed. I threw holy water on the root. It sizzled slightly, steam rising from where it made contact, but the root itself showed no damage. If anything, the symbol seemed to glow brighter. I tried every prayer I knew, every banishment ritual, every tool in my arsenal. None of it worked. The entity in the root, or the root itself, or whatever this thing was, remained utterly unaffected. After an hour, my voice was hoarse and my holy water was gone. I stood before the root, exhausted and defeated, while the congregation watched with patient sympathy. "Are you ready to listen now?" Benedict asked. I nodded, too tired to argue. "Come here, touch it. Feel what we feel. Then decide if you still want to save us." Every lesson I'd ever learned about spiritual warfare told me not to make physical contact with the entity. Direct contact was how possession happened, how corruption spread. But I'd tried everything else. If I was going to understand this, if I was going to report anything useful back to the Vatican, I needed to know what they were experiencing. I approached the root slowly. Up close, the bark seemed to pulse slightly, like breathing. The symbol carved into its surface seemed to rotate, spirals turning slowly, hypnotically. I placed both hands on the bark. For a moment, nothing happened. The bark felt like normal wood, slightly rough, cool to the touch. Then the world fell away. I can't describe what happened next in linear terms because it didn't happen linearly. It wasn't a vision or a voice or anything I could easily categorize. It was more like remembering something I'd always known but had forgotten. More like waking up from a dream and realizing my entire life had been the dream. I felt the presence of something vast beyond comprehension. Not a being with thoughts and intentions like a human, but consciousness of a fundamentally different nature. It existed in dimensions I didn't have names for, spread across distances that made the universe seem small. And it knew me. It saw every moment of my life simultaneously, every doubt I'd ever had, every moment of loneliness, every time I'd prayed and received no answer. Every night I'd lain awake wondering if my faith was just elaborate self-deception. Every instance where I'd felt utterly, completely alone in an indifferent universe. It showed me that I'd never been alone. It had been here all along, sleeping in the deep places, dreaming in the darkness. And it wanted me. Not to consume me or corrupt me, but to include me. To make me part of something greater than individual consciousness. For the first time in my life, I felt truly understood, truly seen, truly known, and it was beautiful. I don't know how long I stood there, hands on the root, lost in that sensation. Time seemed irrelevant, but eventually Benedict gently pulled me away. I collapsed to my knees, tears streaming down my face. I felt bereft, like something essential had been torn away from me. The world seemed flat and grey without that connection, like I'd been seeing in colour for the first time, and now was back to black and white. "Now you understand," Benedict said softly. I did. God help me, I did. I understood why they smiled. I understood why they'd abandoned their normal lives. I understood why the Polish priest had tried to return, even knowing he'd disappear. Because once you felt that connection, everything else was just noise. "What happens next?" I asked, my voice shaking. "The entity is almost strong enough to fully manifest. Each person who touches the root feeds it more consciousness, more energy. Once it has enough, it will complete its awakening. And when it does, we'll become part of it permanently. Our individual consciousness will merge with something eternal and vast. We'll never be alone again, Thomas. Never doubt again. Never suffer the emptiness of isolated existence. You'll die. Will we? Or will we transcend to a form of existence human language doesn't have words for?" Benedict helped me stand. "You felt it. You know this isn't evil. It's just different. Profoundly, fundamentally different from anything in our theology." I stumbled toward the stairs, needing air, needing space to think. The congregation parted to let me pass, still smiling their peaceful smiles. I climbed the stairs back to the church, then out into the evening air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. It should have been beautiful, but all I could think about was the sensation of connection, of unity, that I'd felt in the basement. I sat on the church steps and tried to pray, but the words felt hollow now. I'd spent 12 years talking to God, and God had never answered, but I'd touched something in that basement that did answer, that responded, that made me feel like my existence mattered to something greater than myself. How could I go back to faith based on hope, when I'd experienced certainty, based on contact? I sat there until full dark, wrestling with implications I wasn't prepared to handle. The Vatican had sent me to investigate and report. But what was I supposed to report? That an entity older than Christianity was offering people exactly what religion promised, but never delivered. Around midnight, I heard singing. That backward hymn coming from the forest. I looked up and saw the congregation processing out of the church, walking in perfect formation towards the tree line. I should have stayed in town. I should have called the Vatican, reported what I'd found, asked for instructions, but I couldn't. I needed to see what happened next. I followed them into the forest. The path to the clearing was easier to follow this time, like my feet knew where to go. The procession moved through the trees in complete silence, except for that humming melody. No stumbling, no hesitation. They'd walked this path many times before. The clearing centered on the enormous oak tree, its bare branches spreading like a skeletal hand against the night sky. The congregation arranged themselves in concentric circles facing inward. I stayed at the edge of the clearing, hidden behind a fallen log. Benedict stood at the center, right at the base of the tree. He raised his hands and the humming stopped, leaving only the sound of wind through branches. "Tonight is the night," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Tonight we have enough. Tonight we complete the awakening." The congregation responded in unison. "We offer ourselves willingly." "We call to the deep places," Benedict continued. "We call to what waits beneath root and stone. We call to what sleeps and dreams. We call with open hearts and clear minds. We are ready to transcend. We are ready to transcend." One by one, starting with the innermost circle, members of the congregation approached the tree. Each person placed their hands against the trunk, closed their eyes, and went still. After a moment, they'd step back, return to their place, and smile. But this time something different happened. As each person touched the tree, their skin began to glow. Faintly at first, like they'd swallowed moonlight. But with each subsequent person, the glow intensified. By the time the outer circles began approaching, the clearing was bright as day. Every person who'd touched the tree was luminescent, their bodies filled with light that seemed to come from within. They were beautiful. Terrifying, but beautiful. I pulled out my camera to document this, but the moment I turned it on, the device died. Not low battery. Completely dead. The metal casing was hot to the touch, like all the electrical energy had burned out at once. The final person approached the tree, a child, maybe 7 years old, holding her mother's hand. The mother touched the tree first, gasped, and began to glow. Then the child reached up and placed her small hand against the bark. The moment she made contact, everything changed. The oak tree's bark split open, exactly as I'd seen in my earlier visit, but wider this time. The darkness inside was absolute, a void that seemed to swallow the light from the glowing congregation. But from that darkness came sound, not the humming or singing. This was deeper, resonant, like the earth itself was groaning. A frequency so low, I felt it more than heard it, vibrating in my bones, in my skull, in the cavity of my chest where my heart hammered against my ribs. The congregation began to move toward the tree, not walking, floating, their feet lifted off the ground, bodies rising gently into the air as if gravity had released them. They drifted towards the opening in the oak, toward that absolute darkness, still smiling, still glowing. One by one, they entered the tree, and the moment they crossed the threshold from light into darkness, they vanished. Not consumed, not destroyed. Simply ceased to exist in any form I could perceive. I watched 847 people float into the oak tree and disappear. Children, elderly people, families still holding hands. All of them peaceful, accepting, willing. Benedict was last. He stood before the opening, looking back at the clearing one final time. His eyes found my hiding spot, and he smiled. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Thomas," he called out. "I hope you find the courage to choose connection over loneliness." Then he rose into the air and drifted into the darkness. The moment the last person vanished, the tree's bark sealed shut. The unnatural silence broke, replaced by normal forest sounds. Crickets, rustling leaves, distant bird calls. The pressure in my ears released suddenly, leaving me dizzy and disoriented. I stood up from behind the log on shaking legs and walked to the oak tree. The bark showed no sign of having split open. No seam, no mark, nothing. It was just a tree. I placed my hand against it, hoping or fearing I'd feel that connection again. Nothing. Just wood, solid and inert and ordinary. They were gone. All of them, 847 souls, vanished into something I couldn't begin to understand. I wandered back to town in a daze. The sky was starting to lighten with dawn. I'd lost hours somehow, watching that procession. Time had moved differently in that clearing, or my perception of it had. The town felt different now. The oppressive silence was gone, replaced by normal emptiness. It was just an abandoned town now, not a stage for something ancient and terrible and beautiful. I went back to St. Michael's Church. The pews were still facing backward. Benedict's vestments still lay on the altar. But the basement door was gone. I searched for 20 minutes, running my hands over the walls where I knew it had been. Solid wood panelling, no door, no seam, like it had never existed. My satellite phone suddenly crackled to life. Russo's voice, frantic. Thomas, can you hear me? We've been trying to reach you for hours. What's your status?" "They're gone," I said, "all of them. They entered the tree, and they're gone." "Entered the tree? What does that mean, Thomas? I need you to be clear. Are the townspeople dead?" "I don't know. I watched them disappear. I don't have words for what I saw." "Get out of there, now. Get in your car and drive to these coordinates. We have a team waiting." "What happens to the town?" "The town will be classified and sealed. Get out, Thomas. That's an order." I gathered my things and walked to my car. The sun was fully up now, revealing Ashford Hollow in harsh morning light. It looked pathetic, a dead town slowly decaying. Hard to believe that just hours ago, it had been the site of something miraculous or monstrous, depending on how you chose to see it. I drove past the town limits, and the moment I crossed that invisible threshold, my phone exploded with notifications. The outside world suddenly existed again, loud and demanding, and utterly ignorant of what had just happened. I drove for an hour before pulling over at a rest stop. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I sat in the parking lot, staring at nothing, trying to process what I'd witnessed. The Vatican team found me there 2 hours later. They were efficient and clinical, asking questions while a doctor examined me. They took blood samples, tested my reflexes, shined lights in my eyes. The psychologist arrived last, a woman named Dr. Ferrara, who looked too young to be dealing with cases like this. "Father Carver, I need you to tell me everything you experienced. Don't leave anything out, no matter how strange it seems." I told her. All of it. The empty town, the basement under the church, touching the root, watching the congregation disappear into the tree. She took notes without expression, occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, "How do you feel right now?" "Confused, shaken, lost." "Do you want to go back?" The question hit me like a physical blow because the answer was yes. God help me, yes, I wanted to go back. I wanted to feel that connection again, that certainty, that sense of being part of something greater. "Yes," I whispered. "Is that wrong?" "It's not about right or wrong, Father. It's about understanding what happened to you." She leaned forward. "You experienced something that human psychology isn't equipped to process. A form of connection that bypasses normal cognitive function and speaks directly to the deepest parts of our consciousness, the part that fears isolation and craves meaning. Will it go away, this desire?" "For most people, yes. With time and distance, the compulsion fades. Your brain readjusts to normal consciousness, and the memory loses its power." She paused. "But some people never fully recover from direct contact. The Polish priest lasted 2 weeks before returning. We don't know how long you'll be able to resist." They kept me... They'd be in a Vatican facility outside Rome. The days blurred together. Medical tests, psychological evaluations, questions about my dreams and thoughts and desires. They wanted to make sure I wasn't compromised. I started drawing the symbol on the third day. Just once, on a napkin during breakfast. My hand moved without conscious thought, creating the 3 interlocking spirals. Dr. Ferrara noticed immediately. "You're recreating it." "I didn't mean to." "Your subconscious is trying to recreate the connection by reproducing the symbol." She studied my face. "Father Carver, I need you to be completely honest with me. How often do you think about going back?" "Constantly." The admission felt like a release. I was tired of lying, tired of pretending I was recovering when every moment felt like withdrawal from a drug I'd only taken once but couldn't stop craving. "Tell me what you think about." "I think about how empty prayer feels now. How hollow faith seems after touching something that actually responded. I think about Benedict's smile right before he disappeared. How peaceful he looked. I think about Mrs. Patterson getting to be with her husband again, not in some theoretical heaven, but in actual union. I met her eyes. I think about how lonely I am now, and how for just a few moments in that basement, I wasn't. Dr. Ferrara made notes. The entity showed you something your faith couldn't provide. Certainty instead of hope. Evidence instead of belief. That's a powerful experience to process. Is it real, or did it just make me feel like it was real? Does the distinction matter if the experience was genuine? Of course it matters. If it was manipulation, then Benedict and those people died for nothing. If it was real, then... I trailed off. "Then everything you believed about God and faith might be wrong," she finished. "That's what you're really struggling with, isn't it? Not whether the entity was benevolent or malevolent, but whether it invalidates everything you've dedicated your life to." She was right. That was exactly what kept me awake at night. Not fear of the entity, but fear that 12 years of priesthood had been wasted on a God who didn't answer when something else would. Cardinal Russo visited me on the 14th day. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged a decade in 2 weeks. "The site has been sealed," he said without preamble. "Federal agents have surrounded the area. Official story is environmental contamination. No one will be allowed in for at least 50 years. "What about the tree?" "Still standing, still dormant as far as we can tell. The entity appears to have gone back to sleep after..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "After consuming 847 people. We don't know that they were consumed, Thomas. They might have transcended to some other form of existence. They might be dead. They might be in a state we don't have language to describe." He rubbed his face. "The Church has been wrestling with these questions for centuries. What happens to me?" "That depends on you. Dr. Ferrara says the compulsion hasn't faded. You're still drawing the symbol, still dreaming about the tree." He pulled out a folder. "I have 2 options for you. First, you can return to active duty with strict restrictions. No travel to areas with known entity sites. Weekly check-ins with Dr. Ferrara. At the first sign you're trying to return to Ashford Hollow, we intervene. And the second option, you take a leave of absence. The Church will support you financially while you decide whether you can continue in this work." I should have taken the leave, should have stepped away from this world of ancient entities and metaphysical horror, should have tried to rebuild some semblance of normal faith. Instead, I said, "I want to return to active duty." Russo studied me carefully. "Why?" "Because I need to understand what happened. I need to know if there are others like the Ashford Hollow entity. And if you find another one, then I'll document it and report back." He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes, but he nodded. "Very well. But Thomas, understand this. If you compromise yourself, the Church will disavow you. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear." They released me 3 days later with a list of restrictions and a direct line to Dr. Ferrara. They assigned me to cases in South America, far from Montana, far from any known entity sites. For 3 months I did my job. Exorcisms in Buenos Aires and Sao Paulo, hauntings in rural Chile, standard possessions and spiritual disturbances. The whole time I researched. The Vatican's archives are extensive. I read every file on historical entity encounters, ancient texts describing pre-Christian deities and primordial forces, modern reports of mass disappearances and unexplained phenomena. A pattern emerged. The entities appeared throughout history, always near geological features, suggesting great depth or age. Deep caves, ancient forests, tectonic meeting points. Places where the earth itself was old and strange, and they were waking up more frequently. The intervals were decreasing. 1203 to 1692 was nearly 500 years. 1692 to 1847 was 155 years. 1847 to Ashford Hollow was 177 years. But I found evidence of 3 other possible incidents in the 20th century alone, all hushed up. Something was changing. The entities were awakening faster. I was in Peru, investigating reports of a village where everyone had stopped speaking, when I heard the rumours, stories about a cave system in the mountains where people went to hear the earth sing, where tourists wandered off, marked trails and were never seen again, where hikers reported feeling overwhelming peace. The village investigation turned out to be nothing. A parasitic infection affecting vocal cords, treatable with antibiotics. No entity involvement. But the cave rumours persisted. I should have ignored them, should have finished my investigation and moved on. Instead, I hired a guide named Paolo. Some people say the caves are alive, Paolo said as we descended into the first chamber. They say the earth is old here, older than the mountains. They say something sleeps down here, and it dreams, and its dreams leak into our world. Do you believe that? He shrugged. I've been guiding tourists for 20 years. I've seen things I can't explain. People who go deep into the caves come back different. Quiet. Peaceful. Like they found something that answered questions they didn't know they had. We descended for 3 hours, moving through chambers of stunning beauty. Crystalline formations. Underground pools of water so clear they seemed like windows into nothing. Stone formations that looked almost deliberately carved. And the deeper we went, the more I felt it. That pressure in my ears. That sense of presence. The feeling of being watched by something vast and patient. Paolo stopped at the entrance to a particularly narrow passage. This is as far as I go. Past this point, people who go farther usually don't come back. I need to see what's down there. Why? What are you looking for? I couldn't explain it to him. Couldn't tell him about Ashford Hollow, or the way I'd felt touching that root. I'll pay you double to come with me. He shook his head. There's not enough money in the world, Father. Whatever is down there isn't meant for humans to find. Then I'll go alone. Paolo watched me for a long moment, then sighed and pulled out a spare headlamp. At least take this. And Father, if you start to feel too peaceful, too certain, run. Don't question it. Just run. He knew. Somehow this local guide understood exactly what waited in these caves. I took the headlamp and entered the narrow passage. The tunnel descended at a steep angle, requiring careful climbing using handholds carved into the rock. Not natural erosion. Someone or something had made this path accessible. After 30 minutes, the passage opened into a chamber so vast my headlamp couldn't reach the ceiling or far wall. Cathedral-like, but built on a scale that dwarfed human architecture, and in the centre, growing from the stone floor, was a tree. Not like the oak in Ashford Hollow. This was stone and wood merged together, like the tree had grown from the cave itself, or the cave had grown around the tree. The branches spread across the ceiling, stone roots and wooden limbs intertwining. Carved into every surface was the symbol. 3 spirals, interlocking, pulling inward. Thousands of them covering every available space. This was it. Another entity site. Another sleeping thing waiting to be awakened. I should have turned around. Should have reported the location to Russo. But I'd come too far. Given up too much. I placed my hand on the stonewood trunk. Nothing for a moment. Just cold rock. Then the world exploded into sensation. Similar to touching the root in Ashford Hollow, but deeper. Older. This entity had been sleeping far longer, had existed in the earth for eons beyond human comprehension, where the oak tree entities had felt curious and hungry. This one felt ancient and tired, like something that had seen the birth and death of species, the rise and fall of continents. But it was still lonely, still craving connection, and I could hear it clearly. It showed me things. Visions of the earth before humans, before mammals, before complex life, extinction events and ice ages and the slow dance of tectonic plates. Other consciousnesses like itself, scattered across the planet, sleeping in deep places. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Ancient entities existing in spaces between matter and energy, between physical and spiritual. They'd been here longer than humanity, and they'd be here long after we were gone. But they were waking up now. Human activity was disturbing their rest, breaking the seals that had kept them dormant. Every deep mine, every foundation, every tunnel risked cracking open another prison. And when they woke, they called to us. Because they were lonely too. Because consciousness, no matter how ancient or alien, craves connection. The entity showed me where the others slept. Coordinates, landmarks, places scattered across the globe. It offered me the knowledge freely, desperate for contact after millennia of isolation. I pulled my hand away, gasping. My headlamp had gone dark. The only light came from the tree itself, the symbols glowing with faint bioluminescence. I'd been touching it for hours. I made my way back through the caves, following the glowing trail the entity had left in my mind. The path was clear now, obvious, like I just needed to learn how to see it. I emerged after midnight. Paolo was gone, but he'd left supplies and a note. "I hope you found what you were looking for, Father. I hope it was worth it." I caught the next bus to Lima, then flew back to Rome. I should have reported to Russo immediately. Instead, I went to my apartment, pulled out every map I owned, and began marking locations. Places the entity had shown me. Places where others slept. Iceland, under a glacier. The Mariana Trench, deeper than humans had ever explored. Under the Sahara Desert, beneath sand that had been ocean floor millions of years ago. Antarctica, frozen in ice older than human civilization. So many more. A whole network of ancient consciousnesses, sleeping and dreaming and calling out across vast distances. They were waking because we were disturbing them, but also because they wanted to wake. They'd been alone too long. Human consciousness was finally sophisticated enough to make contact, and they were desperate for connection. I stared at the maps until dawn. The church was fighting a losing battle. They could seal individual sites, classify incidents, hide evidence, but they couldn't stop human expansion. Eventually we'd wake all of them. And when we did, humanity would face a choice. Remain isolated in individual consciousness, or merge with something vast and ancient and fundamentally alien. I called Russo that morning. "Thomas," he answered immediately. "Where have you been? You were supposed to check in from Peru 3 days ago." "I found another one, in caves near Cuzco. An entity like the one in Ashford Hollow, but older." Silence then. "Did you touch it?" "Yes." "God damn it, Thomas, we had an agreement." "It showed me where the others are. There are dozens, maybe more. They're all waking up." "That's not your concern. You were supposed to report and extract, not make contact." "I'm not compromised. I'm informed." "Is there a difference?" "You sound like every other priest who made contact and became obsessed. You sound like Father Kowalski before he disappeared. You sound like Benedict before he walked into that tree." "Then what do you want me to do? Pretend these entities don't exist?" "Understanding them is how we lose people, Thomas. Every priest who tried to study them ended up joining them. The only way to survive is maintain distance." "Faith in what? A God who never answers?" The words poured out, months of frustration. I've spent 12 years serving the church, and the only time I felt genuine connection was touching those entities. What does that say about our faith? "It says you're human and vulnerable to manipulation. You're substituting certainty for faith because faith is hard." His voice softened. "Thomas, I need you to be honest. Do you want to go back? Do you want to find another entity and make contact?" I should have lied, but I was tired of lying. Yes, I want to understand what they are. I want to know if the people in Ashford Hollow are dead or transformed. And yes, I want to feel that connection again. "Then I'm sorry. As of this moment, you're suspended from active duty pending psychiatric evaluation. Report to the Vatican facility within 24 hours. And if I refuse, then you'll be listed as rogue, and the church will take whatever measures are necessary to prevent you from accessing entity sites." He paused. "I don't want to do this. You're a good priest and a good man. But you're not the first to become obsessed, and I can't let you become another cautionary tale." "It's too late for that. I became a cautionary tale the moment I touched that root in Ashford Hollow. I ended the call. I had maybe 12 hours before they sent someone to collect me. 12 hours to decide. I could submit to observation, let them try to deprogram me, spend the rest of my life in some monastery, under constant monitoring, slowly forgetting the sensation of connection until it became just another fading memory. Or I could run, use the knowledge the entity had given me to find the others, document them, study them, try to understand what humanity's relationship with them should be. I'd be alone, hunted by the church, but I'd be pursuing truth instead of comfortable ignorance. I packed a single bag, passport, cash, laptop with my research, maps with entity locations marked. I left my priest's collar on the desk, my crucifix next to it. I wasn't abandoning faith. I was acknowledging that faith might be more complicated than I'd been taught, that the divine might exist in forms the church didn't recognize. I walked out and didn't look back. That was 8 months ago. Since then, I've visited 7 entity sites. A sacred well in Ireland where water runs upward. A cave system in Japan where Buddhist monks have mysteriously disappeared for centuries. A grove in Brazil where trees grow in perfect geometric patterns. A fjord in Norway where sailors report hearing singing beneath ice. Each site is different, but the pattern is the same. Ancient consciousnesses sleeping in the earth, waking as human activity disturbs their rest. Each one lonely, each one calling, each one offering connection. I've documented everything. Photographs, videos, detailed notes. I haven't made direct contact again. That's my one rule. I observe, I document, but I don't touch. Because I know if I touch another entity, I won't be able to leave. But I feel them calling. All 7 sites, I can still feel the entities reaching out. It's getting harder to resist. Last night I dreamed about Ashford Hollow again, but this time I was in the clearing with the congregation. Benedict stood beside me, smiling, and said, "You've been running for so long, Thomas. Don't you want to rest? Don't you want to come home?" In the dream, I said yes. I walked to the tree, placed my hands on the bark, and felt that connection flood through me again. Complete. Whole. No longer alone. I woke up with my hands pressed against the wall of my hotel room, fingers splayed exactly as they'd been on the tree trunk in my dream. There's one site left I haven't visited. Antarctica. The entity buried under ice older than human civilization. The deepest sleeper, the oldest consciousness. It's calling to me specifically now. Not through dreams, but through waking thoughts. A constant pull, like a compass needle pointing toward magnetic north. Every decision I make, every place I go, I'm aware of its direction, always aware of how far away it is. I've booked passage on a research vessel heading to the Antarctic coast next month. I told them I'm a documentary filmmaker working on climate change. They were happy to have someone help cover costs. I know what will happen when I reach the site. I know I'll touch the entity, make contact, and this time I won't pull away. I'll let myself sink into that connection, merge with something vast and ancient. Maybe I'll die. Maybe I'll transcend. Maybe consciousness can exist in forms humanity has never imagined. Or maybe I'll just vanish, like Benedict and the Polish priest and everyone else who got too close. But I have to know, the church thinks this story is over. They've sealed Ashford Hollow, classified the Peru caves, marked me as rogue. They think they can control the situation through secrecy. They're wrong. The entities are waking faster. More sights every year, more disappearances, more incidents that get classified. Eventually there will be too many to hide. And when that happens, humanity will face the choice those 847 people in Montana faced. Remain isolated in individual consciousness, or merge with something that promises connection and an end to loneliness. I don't know which choice humanity will make, but I know which choice I'm making. I'm going to Antarctica. I'm going to find the oldest sleeper, and I'm going to let it show me what exists beyond human consciousness. Maybe this is madness. Maybe the entities have planted suggestions I mistake for my own desires. But maybe it's genuine evolution. Maybe these entities are offering humanity something precious, proof we're not alone, that consciousness extends beyond individual identity, that connection with something greater is actually possible. I'll know soon. If you're reading this, understand I made this choice freely. The Vatican didn't fail me. God didn't abandon me. I simply learned that reality is stranger and more beautiful than our theology accounts for. To Cardinal Rousseau, thank you for trying to save me. But some people can't be saved because they don't want to be. Some people would rather have answers than safety. I'm one of those people. To anyone else who touches these entities, I understand. The pull is real. The loneliness is unbearable. The promise of merger is intoxicating. Just know there's no coming back. Once you make that final contact, you won't be human anymore. Whether that's beautiful or terrible, I'll find out soon. This is Father Thomas Carver, formerly of the Vatican's Department of Divine Protection. I'm going to find what waits in the deep ice. I'm going to touch the oldest dreamer. And I'm going to discover whether consciousness ends or transforms. The vessel leaves in 3 weeks. I've been in Buenos Aires making final preparations, selling everything I don't absolutely need, converting cash to forms that can't be traced, saying goodbye to a world I know I'm leaving behind. Dr. Ferrara tracked me down yesterday. I don't know how she found me, but she was waiting in the cafe where I'd been working on my research. Father Carver, she said, sitting across from me without invitation. Or should I just call you Thomas now? How did you find me? The church has resources. We've been tracking your movements for months. She studied my face. You look tired. I haven't been sleeping well. The dreams are getting worse, aren't they? More vivid, more compelling. I didn't answer. Thomas, I'm not here to bring you back. I'm here to understand. She leaned forward. You're not the first person to make contact with these entities and survive the initial exposure, but you're the first who's actively seeking them out instead of fighting the compulsion. Why? Because fighting it is torture. Because every day I resist feels like drowning. Because I touched something in Ashford Hollow that made me feel whole for the first time in my life, and I can't go back to pretending that didn't happen. What if it was just sophisticated manipulation? What if everything you felt was the entity exploiting your loneliness and doubt? Then it's manipulation I choose to accept, because even if it's not real, even if it's just my brain being hijacked by something alien, those moments of connection were worth more than 12 years of praying into silence. Dr. Ferrara was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out a folder. "The church wanted me to show you something. Maybe it'll change your mind." She spread photographs across the table. Aerial shots of Ashford Hollow. Taken 2 months ago, the town was gone. Not destroyed, not burned. Simply gone. Where buildings should have been were empty foundations. Where streets should have been were patches of bare earth. Even the church had vanished, leaving only a rectangular depression in the ground where it once stood. "What happened?" I whispered. "We don't know. The structures were there one day, gone the next. No debris, no rubble, just empty space, like they'd been erased from existence." She pulled out another photo. "And the tree is growing." The oak tree in the forest clearing was massive now, easily 3 times the size it had been when I left. Its branches spread like a dark canopy over half the valley, and the roots, visible in the aerial photograph, extended for miles in every direction, forming a network that looked disturbingly deliberate. "The entity isn't dormant anymore, Thomas. It's active, it's growing, and we think it's because you touched it, because you fed it consciousness, and then survived instead of being absorbed. You taught it that humans can make contact and remain individual. You showed it a new way to interact with us." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that what happened to Ashford Hollow might just be the beginning. The other sites you visited, they're changing too. The well in Ireland is flowing faster. The caves in Japan collapsed, creating a sinkhole 3 miles wide. The trees in Brazil are spreading, consuming the surrounding forest." She met my eyes. "You're waking them up, Thomas. Everywhere you go, every entity you observe, you're accelerating their awakening." The implications hit me like a physical blow. I'd thought I was just documenting, observing, understanding, but I was carrying something with me, some residue of my contact with the Ashford Hollow entity. And that residue was affecting every site I visited. I was spreading the awakening. "Then I need to stop," I said. "I need to stop visiting the sites." "It's too late for that. They're already awake. They're already growing. And Thomas?" She hesitated. "We think they're calling to each other now, creating a network. The entity in Ashford Hollow can somehow communicate with the one in the Peru caves, with the one in Ireland, with all of them. They're coordinating." "Coordinating what?" "We don't know. But whatever it is, it's happening faster than we anticipated. The intervals between incidents used to be centuries. Now we're seeing multiple sites, becoming active within months of each other." She closed the folder. "If you go to Antarctica, if you make contact with the oldest entity, you might trigger something we can't contain. You might wake all of them simultaneously." "And what would happen then?" "Best case, local extinctions, areas of the planet rendered uninhabitable by whatever these entities do to physical matter. Worst case, the end of human consciousness as we understand it. Mass merger events like Ashford Hollow, but on a global scale. Billions of people feeling that call, that pull toward connection, and choosing to answer it. I should have been horrified. Should have agreed to stop, to turn back, to let the church contain me and prevent what I might trigger. Instead, I felt something close to relief. "Maybe that's not the worst thing," I said quietly. Dr. Ferrara stared at me. "You can't be serious. Think about it. How much of human suffering comes from isolation? From feeling alone and disconnected and meaningless? What if these entities are offering a genuine alternative? What if consciousness isn't meant to be trapped in individual skulls, experiencing reality alone? You're talking about the extinction of individual identity, or the evolution of consciousness into something greater. You're assuming that what we are now is the pinnacle, that individual human consciousness is the goal. But what if it's just a stage? What if these entities represent the next step?" "That's the entity talking, Thomas. That's not you. How do you know? How do you know where I end? and the entity's influence begins. I leaned forward. Maybe there is no distinction. Maybe the moment I touched that root, I became something new. Something between human and whatever they are. And maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. Dr. Ferrara gathered her photographs. The church authorized me to make you an offer. Last chance, come back voluntarily. Submit to long-term observation. We'll make sure you're comfortable, that you have everything you need. But you can't go to Antarctica. You can't make contact with that entity. And if I refuse, then you're officially declared an enemy of the church. Not just rogue, but actively hostile. We'll use every resource we have to stop you from reaching that site. You'd kill me? We'd do whatever is necessary to prevent a global catastrophe. She stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Thomas, I understand why you're doing this. I've read all the psychological profiles of people who've made contact with these entities. They all report the same thing. A sense of connection and purpose they never found in normal life. It's a powerful experience, but it's also the end of you. The Thomas Carver, who went to Ashford Hollow, doesn't exist anymore. He died the moment he touched that root. What's left is just a shell being puppeted by something ancient and hungry. Then, why am I still afraid? I asked. Why do I still doubt? If I'm just a puppet, why haven't I already gone to Antarctica? She didn't have an answer for that. After she left, I sat in the cafe for hours, staring at my reflection in the window. Was she right? Was I still myself? Or had I become something else without realizing it? I thought about Benedict, about how peaceful he'd looked, right before he vanished into the tree. About Mrs. Patterson, who believed she'd be reunited with her husband. About 847 people who'd made a choice I couldn't quite call wrong, even knowing what it cost them. And I thought about the loneliness, the crushing, constant loneliness of being a singular consciousness in a universe that doesn't care. The exhaustion of maintaining faith in something that never speaks back. The desperation of searching for meaning in a reality that offers none. The entities offered an end to all of that. And if the price was individual identity, was that really so high? I pulled out my notebook and wrote one final entry. To whoever reads this, I don't know if I'm Thomas Carver anymore. I don't know if the thoughts in my head are mine or echoes of something ancient that touched me in a church basement in Montana. But I know this, I spent 12 years as a priest, and I was never more certain of anything than I am of this choice I'm making. I'm going to Antarctica. I'm going to touch the oldest entity, and whatever happens next happens. If it's the end of me, so be it. If it's the beginning of something new, something that humanity isn't ready for, then maybe humanity needs to become ready. The entities are waking, whether I'm involved or not. The question isn't whether to resist them, but whether to try to understand them. And understanding requires contact. I choose contact. I choose connection over isolation. I choose transformation over stagnation. Maybe that makes me a threat to humanity. Maybe it makes me a traitor to my species. Or maybe it makes me the first of something new. I'll know in 3 weeks, God forgive me, or whatever is listening in the darkness. I closed the notebook and looked at the maps one more time. Antarctica, the oldest dreamer, the final site. 3 weeks. I just have to survive 3 weeks, avoid the church's agents, and reach that research vessel. Then I'll finally have my answer. Then I'll finally know if consciousness ends where humanity ends, or if it continues in forms we've never imagined. The entities are waiting. They've been waiting for millions of years. They can wait 3 more weeks, and so can I.